Hey everyone, Irene Lyon here, and welcome to this entire world of nervous system health and healing. And today we have a story about my healing journey, how I have been, or how I have come out of this idea of functional freeze. If you don't know what that is, we don't get into that completely in this long form talk. I will post another video, a much shorter video around functional freeze. I highly recommend you check that out if you haven't already. But my husband and colleague Seth Lyon, he thought it would be a good idea to interview me and talk to me about my journey. We started at age 5 and we go all the way to a handful of years ago, which would have been 43-ish, 44 years ago, give or take a year or two. And my process working with chemical trauma, fluid trauma, shock trauma, force vectors, surgical trauma, and the process by which I've navigated and weaved through to be where I am now, fairly functional, healthy, regulated. I am by no means perfect, and there's still healing that I am doing, but we get a lot of questions around how to come out of freeze. And what does it mean when my body is in more physical pain, when I'm no longer in survival stress? And what is fluid trauma and how do I work with it and all these things? So we dive into as much as we can in this just over an hour talk. There is a lot here. I suggest you, if you need to titrate and listen to this in little chunks, please do that. And I just really hope that this discussion, this conversation, and even some of the things we bring in towards the end around what we feel was missing in our training in this world, and how it is so important for us, whether we do this work with others or it's for ourselves, to have foundation, to have this vision and focus on building capacity in the system, and how when that occurs, naturally, organically, we are guided in the direction that we need to go to and what we need to focus on. This journey is not linear. Mine is not linear, therefore yours isn't either. So again, I don't share this so that you mimic what I do. That would be impossible. My story is intense with some of the things I've been exposed to and the things I put my body through, and thank goodness I'm still here today, alive to tell the tale. So enjoy this long form talk with my husband and colleague Seth Lyon, and be sure to leave a comment. Let us know what you think, what you learned. Do you have any questions? And always be sure, if you haven't already, to visit my website, irenelyon.com. There's so much stuff there: resources, courses, audio samplers, ebooks, blog, articles, all sorts of stuff there. All right, everyone, enjoy our conversation.
Hi.
Hi, Seth.
Hi there.
What are we going to do today?
We're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about your freeze.
My freeze.
Yes, and we're going to talk about all the many things that can happen when freeze lifts. But before we get into that, I think it'd be good to give some people some background. So, because people go into freeze, go into different survival responses from all sorts of things.
Yeah.
You didn't have the traditional sort of thing that you see most, where it's like a yelling, screaming, hitting, abusive stuff. Yours was very different. And
thanks,
so
Mom and Dad.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks
They
for
did a
not
good
hitting
job,
and
but not
abusing me.
Yeah, absolutely.
To this day, I have never heard the voice being raised at me ever.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a good job on that front.
Mm-hmm.
But you had some experiences very early on and then later that your system went into freeze at a very early age, what we call functional freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you could just talk a bit about some of those early exposures to things and that happened.
Yeah, and then for context, the other reason why we wanted to do this is because I would say one of the questions that's asked the most is, how do I get out of freeze?
Yeah.
And this is not a linear path.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody to think that they have to mimic what I've had to do, because as we start to hear the things I did as a kid and as a teenager, a 20-year-old, and in my early 30s, most people don't do.
Right. Yeah, you have a unique history.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to scare anyone when I say that even to this day, 15 years after starting somatic experiencing, I am still having to get body work regularly, and there's tension patterns still coming out of my body, and yet I'm still fully able to function. And I have been, like, there was only really a short period of time where I was incapacitated
Yeah. Yeah. Right when we met,
when we
pretty
met.
much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to start with that disclaimer
Yeah.
because it can be a little overwhelming to not know how to start and where to start. And also bear in mind, I didn't have my courses when I was doing this work.
That's right. You had to figure it out yourself.
Holy shit. And so
Yeah.
I like, if I had what I've created for everyone, I think it would have been a much different experience.
Yeah.
Even before I went into my professional trainings with Feldenkrais and somatic experiencing, it would have made such a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's a good disclaimer. And I think this video is for the people who are also kind of more outliers like you, who have unusual experiences,
Yeah.
because there's lots of stuff focused on, traditional forms of abuse and neglect and that kind of stuff. This is more the weird kind of stuff that can happen.
This would be good for people who have been high-end athletes,
Yeah.
military,
Yes.
first responders, children who grew up on farms where they had to do a lot of dangerous stuff and stuff that was probably too much for them at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was your question?
Well, so the first question is, yeah, what are some of for you, like, what were the early experiences that started propelling your system into freeze?
Well, the one that I have memory of is when I was 5 years old, I had my first physical accident that I know of. And that was, I was, going down our street in my childhood home neighborhood with my friend Stefan, and I'm on my little bike. I don't have any memory of how it happened, but I went over the handlebars
Yeah.
and landed on my right arm and fractured it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a compound fracture, the bone wasn't sticking out,
Yeah.
and I don't remember the pain, but I remember, and it was the end of Labor Day long weekend, so it was warm, it was summer, it was fun. I think we maybe were away, and he's one of my best friends. I'm like, I'm home, let's go for a bike ride. Okay, Irene.
Yeah.
And then I remember walking back up, pushing my bike in tears, and he wouldn't help me.
Mm. Mm.
And I mean, we're like 5, and he
Yeah.
was a year younger than me, so I don't blame him, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, nobody's helping me. And then, and I don't have any memory of this, but I got home, and then the next memory I have was being at the emergency
Right.
hospital, and it was so busy because it was probably 6 p.m. on a Monday, Labor Day long weekend. So everyone and their dog with boating accidents and sporting accidents and probably alcohol poisoning are in that emergency.
Right.
And I'm like
Overwhelming
sitting,
environment.
yeah, and we're just
Yeah.
like we waited for so long. And then I remember the doctor, the orthopedic surgeon who was on call, I kind of remember him. And that's an interesting story that we can touch into because there's a full circle there with
Right.
Dr.
Yes.
Dr. McCormack.
Right.
And all I remember is my dad said, yeah, he looked a little green in the face because I think he had to reset my arm.
Mm.
And maybe I was like the first really little kid he had to do that with, and he was quite young. So I don't really remember much, but then I went, then that was, the next day was like the first day of elementary school or kindergarten. Like it's like, and here we are learning how to write.
Right.
And I had to use my left hand. So that first sort of entry into school was like totally upside down.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you basically had this big shock and this accident, this break, which maybe isn't necessarily traumatic, but you didn't have support right away, and you're
Mm-mm.
sort of then on your own, like your friend wouldn't help you, so you're
Mm-hmm.
pushing your bike, and so your system's starting to feel probably a bit overwhelmed, and then you're in an emergency room with all this stuff. So yeah, pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
And
And, I don't, that's not as overwhelming as maybe a year later when I had my tonsils taken out.
right.
But, and that's because I'm comfortable in a medical setting. My dad is, a veterinary surgeon, so he's comfortable in a medical setting. I don't think that had a lot of heat other than it was just long and tiring.
Yeah.
And I was a pretty healthy kid,
Mm-hmm.
in all matters of that and regulated. But the next year,
Mm-hmm.
so again, the timeline is foggy, but we had gone to the Philippines because that's where my mom's from, and I got quite sick. I don't even know if it was a flu, a cold, but my tonsils got super inflamed. And so when we came back, I quite quickly went into surgery to have my tonsils removed, which was very common back then.
Yeah.
And this would be like the third memory of my life, which was horrific. And as soon
Mm.
as my parents left, and maybe I'm making this up, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure this occurred.
Mm.
Pretty sure. As soon as they left, the nurse that was in, and I still remember there was a window here and the bed was here, she literally grabbed me and like flipped me on my belly. I was wearing a hospital gown, pulled up my gown and stabbed me in the butt with a sedative
Mm-hmm.
that you get pre-surgery to
Right.
calm you. So I went into sedation and chemical freeze through this
Yeah.
sedation
Yeah.
while being absolutely terrorized and frightened.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember anything after that other than waking up and being really sore in my throat, which is what happens when you have your tonsils out.
Yeah.
But of course, no one knew that that occurred
Right.
because why would they?
Yeah. And it's just you were alone with it. It's just sort of life per usual in those days. Sometimes at the hospital, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And I have no memory when I remembered that memory. It might have
Mm.
been in the SC training. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I can talk about it now with just the tiniest bit of tear.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before I would talk about it and I'd just be like,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
back as that little 5, 6, probably 6 year old by then. Just, I mean, if I think about how little I was and how cute I was when I was that
Yeah.
age, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, it's terrifying to think how many kids have that happen and maybe never get a chance to even process that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as we know, that kind of medical trauma is deeply, deeply connected to stored tension patterns in the body,
Yeah.
stored survival stress, which can then signify, chronic restless leg,
Mm-hmm.
chronic all the things,
Yeah. Tension, pain in
tension,
areas. Yeah. Yeah.
pain.
Yeah. And the addition of that, because the body's already overwhelmed, and then you have that chemical freeze introduced,
Yeah.
and there's all the terror underneath, right?
Hmm.
And then the surgery itself is overwhelming, and
Hmm.
you're alone. It's just a
Hmm.
perfect cocktail for the system to be like, I am just going to numb out and kind of stay
Completely.
that way, right? And
Completely.
now you mentioned your parents and growing up in a medical setting. That brings in another vector that's actually quite subtle. But
Yeah.
if you could talk a bit about just the chemicals and
Yeah.
stuff that you were exposed to, because
Yeah, sure. And this isn't something that I ever realized until, so I'm going to fast forward, leapfrog to when we were in, you and I,
mm,
we were sitting in that Portland training with Kathy
with
Kain.
Kathy, yeah, yeah,
And I'm sure I could find the year. It would have been like maybe 2012.
yeah, something around there. It was early, 2013 maybe.
It was after my intense skin stuff had shifted, but it was still there
Yeah.
mildly. And I remember where I was sitting, and she said, so we're going to talk about fluid trauma,
Right.
which can happen due to excess exposure to chemicals or electrocution.
Hmm.
Electrocution, so being zapped by lightning,
Electric
electric
fence.
fences,
Yeah, yeah.
getting your finger stuck in something. And she said, and see, even as I say this, I get a little shiver through me.
Mm,
She said, for those of you that have this, but you might not know it, as I start to talk about this, you're going to feel like you want to run out of this room as fast as you can. You might start to feel dizzy. You might start to feel sick.
yeah,
And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever.
yeah.
Like,
Taking notes.
and then it happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, I felt like I was on a ship. I didn't feel good. I might have said something to you. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Do you
remember.
remember?
Yeah, I remember. You're just like yeah, you looked like you turned a bit green,
Yeah.
and yeah, yeah,
So that happened. And then we went to do breakouts because then you practice what she's
right,
teaching. And I think you and I were partnered up because I wasn't going to let
yeah,
anyone else touch me at that point. And so, for those that don't know how this works, we're in a training room with massage tables, and we're just all very close to each other. And I was on the table, and you weren't so sure what to do. So,
yeah,
Kathy came over and she put her hands, where she would teach us to work with fluids. And she literally touched me for no more than 10 seconds.
yeah,
Like she felt the energy of my fluids, my cells, my fluid body. It's the fluid body,
yeah,
which isn't just the blood. This
yeah. It's
is
all the fluids.
all the
Yeah,
fluid, the
right.
lymph in the eyes, in the interstitial space of the cells, and the fluid in the cells, the
Yes.
digestive, like everything.
Yeah,
And she was like, "That's it."
yeah,
I still remember like her hands lifted, no more.
yeah, yeah.
And at that point I went, "Oh fuck."
Yeah. Start like, well, and that started to connect some dots to.
It did. And then later on, we then did our full touch training with her in
Yeah,
Seattle. And I remember talking to her and Steve and Terrell, who were co teaching this at the time. And I showed them the photos
that's right.
that I had taken by a Chinese medicine doctor when I was really starting to get these rashes that were coming out, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I said, so this happened to me, you guys, when I was with Kat, and Kathy remembered. I said, is it possible that these skin problems I've been having are due to chemical trauma? And I showed Steve the picture. And if anybody hasn't seen the pictures, go look at the pictures because it looks like I have third-degree burns.
Yeah,
It's
they're
not just a little patch of psoriasis or
no,
eczema.
no. It's on the website just so people know.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
And that's before it got worse. That's
yeah.
what it
That
was.
that was yeah, yeah,
That was only 2 months in.
yeah,
And so he was like, whoa, yep, that kind of looks like chemical trauma. And it has the same look if you see photos of people who have been in nuclear disasters,
mm-hmm.
because that is chemical, right? Nuclear waste chemical. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it doesn't, that didn't kill me, right? That usually will kill someone eventually. So that was another piece. And then to wrap that up, it happened again when I was at another training with Kathy in Denver, because I had to travel
that's
there,
right.
because I couldn't go to another one due to an assisting job. And I remember she got into the chemical fluid trauma in that class because they were a bit behind. And I had not the same reaction, but it was intense enough that I excused myself. I went up to my hotel room and I had a bath,
Yeah,
because being in water, when you have had chemical trauma, fluid trauma, can help reset the fluids. And you need to feel that flow and
yeah,
those fluid dynamics kind of reestablishing in the body.
yeah,
And what she said was the best way to work with this is to actually go, if you can, the best is to be in the ocean
yeah,
and be in the like a body of natural salt water where you can float and it's body temperature and you can just feel that.
yeah,
Of course, not everybody has access to that, so that's where a bath can be useful. And then as we're finding out, grounding and earthing can
Yeah.
also restore that fluid balance. So anyway, that was sort of that entry point into,
Realizing like,
oh my
wow.
goodness.
Yeah.
And so, um,
And that all came from your early childhood as well. Like, and from those early, growing up in the veterinary clinic, being exposed to all the cleaning chemicals, just normal stuff, but at such a young age. And then if your system was already starting to have a tendency towards freeze and then taking these chemicals in, right? So it's how stuff gets stuck.
what I was exposed to, again, isn't anyone's fault. It was just my life and how I was brought up. But I was, from a very young age, around a lot of chemicals. And then when I was old enough to help and work, I was in Mr. Clean, I was in bleach, I was washing windows, I was, no gloves were worn with this
Right.
sort of stuff. Inhaling solvents and things that you would be cleaning ears with, other
Yeah.
things with, and recently I found out that flea and tick powder, which is what, I don't know if people still use this, but I believe the person I learned this from, he said it is a neurotoxin.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense if it's going to kill fleas and ticks, and those things are hard, you know,
Yeah. Pretty hardy.
things.
Yeah.
You need some serious toxicity, and I can still taste the
Mm.
flea and tick powder because we use so much of it
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
animals. X-ray development.
Yep.
Again, it wasn't there was a point where it was the old-fashioned way, but still, that I can smell it. And then my mom was exposed to DDT as a young woman in university. They would spray their dorm rooms frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And
And
for
so I'm this
people
little
may not
egg,
know how that can, yeah, transfer
of
into,
course.
yeah.
All this stuff sticks with us. Like it's
Mm.
the ability for this stuff to detoxify, especially when you're not trying to, is low.
When that stuff can be passed down, it can
Yep.
travel from your
Yep.
mom. It can affect the egg that becomes you,
Yep.
and
Yep.
yeah, especially if there's no knowledge that we need to detox, or you know,
No.
it just stays
And
stuck.
the thing that's so different with this is we talk about inter and transgenerational trauma from the point of view of atrocities happening to our family, our ancestors, and persecution and all that is real, but we don't think about what our parents and ancestors were exposed to
Mm-hmm.
in this chemical sense.
Yep.
Which again, it probably actually happens more than we realize. Think about the mining in Congo with cobalt,
Yeah.
which has been making a little bit of news headlines. I think it should be made more
For sure.
prolific. But the one gentleman, I can't remember his name, will link the episode where I heard him. Like these people, like their babies are being born with defects.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They're
that's
just
perfect because that is chemical in nature. This mining of this, very toxic substance that
element.
we
Yeah.
all have in our cell phones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's one example where you would see those defects. The same with thalidomide, which is what was given to women here, especially in Canada, to prevent morning sickness. So that's just to give people that there's more than we maybe realize where chemicals are influencing our expression of not just rashes, but how our body grows in utero.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah.
Like that was a travesty, the thalidomide
Yeah.
disaster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so chemical trauma, definitely what I had. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
Can we study that on a microscope and get a piece of blood that says, oh, yes, Irene had chemical trauma? No, we can't.
No.
But this is deduction via process of elimination. I don't eat crap. I'm not stressed in the way that one might think. And so I've got eczema or psoriasis. My gut, as you know, is strong and healthy. It's not a gut issue. A lot of people say, oh, skin issues are all about the gut. No, they aren't.
Not necessarily, but it can be, right?
It
And that's what
can
can make it
be.
so tricky. There can be so many causes,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
And then the other thing, I had a lot of allergy shots when I was a kid
Mm-hmm.
for allergies. Did they work? I have no idea. um, but I mean, I don't have allergies, but there was a time in my 20s, it was actually around my Feldenkrais training where my allergies went away.
Interesting.
So I actually think I cured my allergies through more mind body stuff than those toxic shots that I had it was a few years.
Oh, wow.
I was getting injected at the doctor's office with these things. So
Yes.
that's also chemical in nature. Let's not forget that. And so, yeah, it just it snowballed, but it was interesting. It wasn't until I started to defrost and later in my somatic experiencing worlds that my skin literally exploded. If I had a stressful event in my teenage years, my 20s, there's 3 instances where I can remember I had a flare, but it always calmed down.
Yeah, like the system would start to express it, but then it would calm down
It
again.
would retreat.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is the thing that's super difficult with skin issues. And I know we want to also talk about shock trauma and my accidents,
We can get there. Yeah.
but Kathy Kain said once, and I hated her for it, kind of. She said, I always get excited when someone comes in with a rash or a skin problem because you can see it.
Right. It's not on the
Versus
inside.
if there's like a cancer growing inside or some form of narrowing of the arteries or whatever else, neurodegenerative disease of the nerves, central nervous system, you're not seeing it. But the thing with the skin is it's the largest organ in our body. And so when it starts to express, something's going on.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to detoxify through our skin. We're supposed to detoxify through our kidneys and our liver, our spleen, our urine, our poop, right? And so there are elements of my organs that clearly were sluggish. And this is something that to this day I'm still working with because of the initial chemical trauma.
Yeah.
So my system had to express it through the skin.
Yeah, and that's part of being in freeze early on too, right? Is those processes of elimination don't work as well, and stuff just gets stuck, and the lymph doesn't know how to do it, and it's just the systems don't work as well when we're living that way.
Exactly.
And when we met, your skin had just started to go into this massive eruption, and it was that way for the first 2 years of our life together, where you were basically non-functional. And that all happened because of a specific event, which I think actually would be good to talk about, because it just shows how critical it is to not do too much with this work. How powerful this work can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I tell the story?
Yeah.
So I was in I had just finished my somatic experiencing training in California. And the final SE advanced training, we were doing touch work. And when I really think, oh my God, when I think about how little time we had to learn and how little time we had to be introduced to these practices, I want to know how many other people are screwed up from not having enough titration, because I had a pretty good system going into that with a lot of stuff trapped. And I remember being, again, in this massive room, like there's like 80 people in this advanced training. And I'm lying on the table, and my colleague who was practicing, and she doesn't know my history, was Kira. She went right to my knee, which has had 5 surgeries.
Right.
And she didn't know that. But I was, unraveling these pieces, and all I remember is I yelped so loud that another friend later on at lunch asked if I was okay because she heard me from the other side of the room.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like a sign that there was less freeze in my system. And, so it was working, but it was working in a very messy way.
Yeah.
I didn't, because that occurred, and then I'm back into learning. I'm back into now being the person practicing. It's like
Right.
there was no time there's no time to integrate.
Yeah.
Goes back to, gosh, I wish I had had my own work before going into that training so I could actually have learned better in that training.
Right.
So that happened. And then myself and a friend, we then decided to do a master class with Peter Levine, because at that point he was only doing master classes, as he still continues to do. And it was called Eye of the Needle, and it was all on surgical and anesthesia trauma.
Yeah.
And they were looking for demos, so people for Peter to work with for demonstration.
And you'd had a lot of surgeries at this point.
And I'd had a lot of surgeries, so more than just that tonsillectomy. After that, I had at least 4 to 5 surgeries, like full general anesthetic reconstructive surgeries of my knee, a patella fracture, like lots of surgeries. And I just want to put a little pin in something here, because a lot of the clients we work with and students, they forget that they had surgeries when they were infants or toddlers. Yeah. And nobody ever stops to think that that is a massive thing to work with.
Yeah.
Or mom was under some form of surgical intervention when she was pregnant, that kind of thing. So
yeah,
it's funny how we have amnesia to some of these things until we start to hear, oh yeah, that's right, I did have a surgery when I was 2. Completely forgot about that.
Right. Hugely impactful on the system.
Huge. Yeah. And people don't think much of it because usually it's a life-saving procedure.
Right. It had to happen. It was a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. But
it's
it was
positive.
Also, yeah.
But not good for the overall system in general.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm a demo, and I still vaguely remember the room. It was in Tiburon in Marin County, and I don't remember much of what occurred when I was working with him, and it was in sitting. There was no touch work, which I think is interesting, because as Peter started to refine how he taught that, a lot of it was done laying down.
That's right. That's right.
But we just kind of talked. It was more talking. And he was querying me about all my surgeries. I think we went through all of them. I'd love to see that video if it's still somewhere in the archives. But what happened is I think he lost focus. And I only know that because his past assistant, Justin, whom we got to know quite well, said to me one day, because Justin kept checking in with me after that, because I wasn't doing well after that session. So I'll go back in a second. And he said, Irene, I've watched Peter do hundreds of demos, and he's recorded, at that point was recording all of them. He said there were only 2 sessions where I wanted to run up to Peter and hit him over the head with a hammer, and yours is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, he probably should have done that.
Yeah. Stop.
But I don't have any memory of it being overwhelming, but clearly I was going into deeper shutdown.
Yeah, because he kept on asking you about all these, and each time he's asking you, because the trauma is still stuck, it's bubbling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I think he got sidetracked because he really liked the fact that I had lived in Whistler, British Columbia for 13 years. And he was like, guess who taught me how to, I still remember, he's like, guess who taught me how to ski? And that there's nothing wrong with him asking that. It's,
relational. Yeah.
Establishing connection. And I said, who? He goes, Nancy Green. I was like, wow. And she won an Olympic medal for Canada in skiing. And then I was like, well, interestingly enough, her son built the house that I live in. So there was this interesting connection.
Yeah.
And then I think that might have pulled him out of his practitioner mode.
Yeah.
To a degree that he didn't even realize he was going too far, because I was so composed.
Right. Which is
I
this is
was
functional freeze, right?
I
Like,
was so functionally frozen, but
yeah,
able, I could still talk like this.
yeah, yeah. It's
And so
invisible, really. Like,
it's
yeah,
completely invisible.
yeah,
So that ended, I don't remember much. Um, and then after that, I was with my car and I drove back home to Canada. But I remember starting to feel these skin eruptions.
mm-hmm,
And I spent the night in a colleague's dojo in Ashland. I didn't sleep a wink. Not only did it stink, but I was itchy. I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? What is going
mm,
on? And then I went to Brighton Bush, which is where we met,
yeah,
and I had to just stay there. And then I left, and then I remember going to a friend's wedding in Seattle on my way up, and both my two friends looked at me and were like, "What is wrong?" Because they
yeah,
could see how inflamed I was and
yeah,
just red.
yeah,
Anyway, so that would have been October-ish, September-ish, end of summer. And then when you and I reconnected, that would have been November. And then obviously safety, connection. I found the person I
mm,
was supposed to be with, at least at this point in time.
yeah,
And everything just went, okay, let's have a
yeah.
party. And
Let's
it
go
just
kablooey.
started. It just,
And yeah, the train was already rolling,
yeah.
and then we met, and it was like, yep, okay, I have more safety. I can. There's someone who can support me, and boom.
Hmm.
So yeah, and then the next 2 years were just, yeah, really, really horrific, very difficult time, and
It's hard to describe to people how bad that was.
yes, yeah,
But you would hear me in the shower screaming
yeah,
because it was so painful, just all these open sores and wounds. And I couldn't sleep for a long portion of time because there was a point where there was no side that I could lie on.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah,
Right?
yeah. You spent like, I remember like 6 months basically. You had to just like be on your knees because you
Yeah.
couldn't really lay on any surface,
No.
and so you
No.
didn't
And I
really
think
sleep
that
much.
that time is what actually made, because up until that, I was still skiing pretty hard and figure
Yeah,
skating and hiking and running. I'm pretty certain that me having to be on my hands and knees for as long as I did
mm-hmm,
screwed my left knee. Like, I'm obviously functional, but I'm not the way I was before I met you.
yeah,
And it's not age, it's not none of that. It's because I was literally like hanging on for my life on my knees. And because I would be there and then I'd like doze off.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then I would try to lie down and then it would be too painful. And then I have to go back up onto my knees and
yeah,
hands.
yeah, yeah,
It's wild. It's incredible I survived.
yeah. Well, and
And, and one thing I will say is, don't underestimate how intense this can be for a person. Because the one woman that I've met who has helped me a bit with this, she was very compassionate with my situation because she lost an uncle to a skin condition.
that's right.
And I get it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's all these nerve endings
yeah,
and you look terrible.
yeah, yeah. And you feel
Yeah.
terrible, and you
You
can't
feel
function
terrible, you're
much.
uncomfortable, you can't wear clothes.
And again, just for the people watching this, like this doesn't mean this is going to happen to you,
No,
right? This was an extreme situation
very.
given the amount of chemical exposure you had, was unusual,
Along with the sports.
along with the sports, and that's what we'll get to next because
Yeah.
that's what really locked the system down. But this stage when we met was the beginning of your system really defrosting. And it had started, with the training, of
Yeah.
course, but like then us meeting and then this all coming out,
Hmm.
right? And then, it's obviously gotten so much better. It's basically all resolved now. You still be little things that will express
Yeah.
if like you're not eating the wrong things or something, or but it's not a chronic thing anymore. It's resolved.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
But that took a few years and with multi levels of support.
Yeah.
And what happened next, though, is that those physical experiences started to unravel.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where we've been more recently. So
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, we could backtrack back to again your late childhood, early teens, and what you were getting into.
Yeah, so I figure skated.
Yeah.
I skated. So that requires lots of falling when you're learning how to jump. My body type really wasn't the best type for jumps and spins. I'm much more stocky and wide, not long and lean like a lot of the top end figure skaters. I should have been a speed skater.
Yeah.
Like I have power and I could dance. Like dance was fine, but because of I just didn't get a lot of it. I fell a lot
Yeah.
on the pelvis. I then broke my wrists again, like I think 3 times when I was in elementary school. One fracture wasn't even diagnosed immediately, like things like that. So lots of impacts, lots of having the wind knocked out of me. And of course, you're not processing any of that stuff at that age. No one does that now, right? Nobody knows to do that. You get up and you keep going unless you are so injured that you lie there and then all the skaters are told to stop. Because when you're figure skating, it's not just you on the rink. There's like usually 20 other kids, young adults doing their routines with the coaches. Like it's a very high traffic thing. So yeah, there was never, ever anything like that to help.
No attention, like pause, are you okay? You know.
Well, maybe a little bit, but I certainly didn't know how to feel my sensations.
Right. Yeah.
Certainly didn't cry.
Yeah. Well, and you were already basically functionally frozen at this point because of the chemical exposure
and that early
surgery.
Yeah.
Right. So all
there's
those impacts are coming in, but they're not going out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I skied.
Yeah.
Downhill skied. That was less intense when I was young. But as I got more skilled and more adventurous, I mean, I was a really good skier. I could have been a downhill ski racer. I was for a while, right?
Yeah.
To give people an idea, like I was never trained professionally, but I decided one day to have some fun and enter in a race in the provincials for British Columbia with our high school, and I won all the races.
Yeah.
With no training.
Yeah.
And this girl, she was so pissed, and her father was so pissed. They were Italian. Kelly Pasco, I still remember her name. They were so mad because they thought that shouldn't be allowed because I wasn't, and maybe I shouldn't have been doing that. But so I was good.
Yeah.
But it was actually that second race where I blew out my ACL, my first knee injury. Karma, I don't know. But and that was the first step towards me having this cycle of knee injuries, surgeries, rehab, recovery.
Yeah.
And physically doing good things for my body because I recovered from them physically. But again, nobody ever processes the emotional, the sensorial, the lack of loss of function. Like none of that occurs.
Yeah.
So that was one piece.
Yeah.
And then I got into paragliding.
Yeah.
Which is like running. Well, it's not like you run off of a mountain with this huge wing. It's like a parachute, but bigger. And I never got massively hurt doing that. I banged my tailbone a few times, but I was doing that functionally frozen as anyone who does that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
one will do any kind of adventure sport like that and be fully regulated.
No. It's very important. You can't, because you're the only way you could perform at that high of a level in that much danger is if you're functionally frozen. I mean,
it's mind-boggling when I really think about the things that I did on skis, on a paraglider. It really is amazing I survived because I know people who did not.
Yeah.
Right. Clearly I'm supposed to be here. So, but yeah, there was, with skiing, there were impacts.
Yeah.
You know, I've had concussions with paragliding, torsion where you're being whipped in the air,
Yeah.
dropping, tensions, wanting to break, not being allowed to break because that might collapse your wing. Like there's all these things. And I did get some craniosacral therapy and massage when I lived in Whistler.
Yeah.
But this is, again, without the lens of the nervous system,
Yeah.
it ain't going to do anything.
Yeah.
It feels good, and maybe it'll rearrange my coccyx to be in the right position.
Yeah.
But that shock trauma and the vectors of force, as you said, when my skin started to alleviate and calm down, then I was thrown into what could be best described as it was like I had fibromyalgia, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And it was about 6 years ago that I had a session with a craniosacral rolfer gentleman, highly experienced. He actually studied with Peter Levine at Peter Levine's first training here in Vancouver. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah.
And I remember he was working on my head, and I was like, feels like you're doing surgery.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he was, well, I kind of am. And that session was in January of 2019. And that opened up something
That was
because,
like, yeah, it was that point at which all these pains and tensions and just, yeah, and it's like, for people who don't know what we mean by vectors, there's this thing called force vectors where when you get an impact, you can think of that as like, say your butt hits the ground, there is a force going through your body that
yeah,
is supposed to exit.
exit,
And
like a
in a
bullet.
regulated system, and where you stop and you feel
Yeah.
the emotions and you feel the sensations of the fall, and you let yourself cry if you need to, and you orient around, and all the stuff that we teach in the programs, that stuff won't stay stuck. But if you're already functionally frozen, they will stay stuck in the tissues literally, and you had hundreds, if not thousands, of these force
Thousands.
vectors
Yeah.
winding through your system.
Yeah.
So all that started
Yeah.
to unravel with that
Yeah.
session.
Yeah. You don't want, it's a funny way of saying it, but like it's like a bullet going through. Like if
Yeah.
there's an exit wound, it's good.
That's right.
Right. But with these force factors, they get stuck. And if anybody's watched, you know, a good show, a movie where, you know, they're trying to get the bullet out, it has to come out, because if it doesn't come out, it's going to cause problems.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with this. And so that session occurred, and then there's no way to describe it, but there's just been these cycles and cycles of chronic, what you would call chronic pain. But it's like you're fine one night and then you wake up and every single part of your spinal fascia is on fire. And I can move, but it's like, it's like this, it's like, what? And I'm like, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so it can be confusing to someone who doesn't understand this theory, you could say, because if I didn't know any different, I would go to a doctor and they would probably give me painkillers.
That's right.
They would give me muscle relaxants.
Yep.
And I will say it does suck to
Yep.
have to go through your day with this tension. And there's been days where I have taken some Advil. But the interesting thing is that those over-the-counter meds don't, you know, anti-inflammatories, they don't take the edge off because this is so deep in the nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of sounds a little all over the place, but basically from that moment in 2019 until this week,
Now.
there are these twists and shifts and changes, and then it's okay for a bit, and the system settles, and then another layer comes out.
That's right.
Right? It's like my swimming pool beach ball analogy that I talk about in that healing trauma video series.
Yep.
It's like my pool is getting bigger and bigger, and that means there's more room for these big boulders to surface. And
You know, that's something that, you know, people can get confused by, like people in our programs, like when they're going through your curriculum, right? Like I think there was even a message from a student, like I'm feeling more regulated, but I'm feeling more pain.
pain.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the part that I think is really hard to convey to not just the person doing the work, but maybe their medical care providers. Because if they don't understand this, they think something is really wrong.
Right.
And if your other systems are getting more regulated, and I'm thinking about that comment I saw, and same with me, like my immune system, my energy, my clarity of focus, my hormones are better, like all the, good relationships, better boundaries, all these things. So why the heck am I feeling this tightness? And this is where you have to kind of be like, oh, these are the old force factors. These are the old tensions that never were even thought of because the person had no awareness because they were functionally frozen.
That's right. For people who may be, experiencing similar things and want to know what to do, you've done lots of different things to support yourself. Would you say that the nervous system work is kind of the foundational piece, and then there's other things you can bring in to work directly with the tissues? Like, maybe just talking a bit about some of the things that have been helpful.
So for me, the nervous system work is not enough.
Yeah.
I've had to do regular osteopathic work, regular tissue work, so muscle, fascial, and this isn't just like, massage where you're getting flow. Like that's really nice too.
Sure.
And I do that, but like very specified, we could say working with someone who has some Rolf training or structural integration training, where they understand these force vectors and they understand not just I'm here to get the muscle loose, but like the way that the system might brace.
Yeah, in the fascia.
So you can't just dig in. Like people think, oh, the harder the better, make me cry. The trouble with that is if that piece of tissue, muscle, fascia, tendon, ligament, and even the bone has a force vector in it, and you have this great, massage therapist who's really good at getting into things, but if your system can't keep up with what they're doing, you will shut down in that session. Or you might override, or you're going to feel anxious. Yeah. So I think, they don't have to be totally trained like we are, but a good person that works with the tissue feels when the system starts to tense, and then they back off, and then they wait.
Yeah.
And then they go a little, and then they back off. And they also want to, movement. So the best body workers I've worked with can tune into the fascia, the muscle, the bone, all the tissues, but they're also helping your joints move at the same time.
Yeah.
And they let you move. They're open to you crying.
Yeah.
Or, like you have to dialogue with the body. You can't stay there like a zombie in a coffin, just having your body be worked on in this service of working with these force vectors.
Yeah. There has to be room for you to process emotionally, sensationally, energetically, what is happening, what is moving through your system as stuff gets loosened up, because it can be intense.
And then and I'm still not the best at this, but you want to have time to process and integrate that. Yeah. Right? It's best if you don't dive into stuff right away, even if it's just standing in the park for 10 minutes afterwards and just letting those things shift. But I also understand this isn't possible for everyone, and this is the conundrum, whether it's money, whether it's having resources, finding someone, you can only do it on your lunch hour and then you have to go back to work. It's not a good situation.
Yeah.
So every person will be unique, but I do say and suggest, like, if you've had physical accidents and you've got these maybe trapped force vectors along with this functional freeze, which let's face it, most do if they've had that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It is important to try to have some time regularly to work on this stuff. The other thing I'll say is I've seen some of our students in SBSM do amazing work just with themselves.
Exactly.
because they're going through this curriculum.
Yep. Yep.
Maybe I should do my curriculum. I mean, I created the.
Well, like you were saying, if you had access to your
Yeah.
creation back in the day, it would have
Yeah.
been a whole different story.
Yeah.
And we do teach people, how to bring
Touch.
in touch to themselves. And that's one of the things that I think, in addition to physical manipulation and working with the fascia and those good things, understanding how impactful it can be just to convey a sense of safety through touch.
Yeah.
Right? And how the system is waiting for that.
Yes.
Right?
And the amount of people that do, I'm thinking about the joints lesson in SBSM. It's like only in the first 3 weeks, you go into those comments and there are dozens where, why did I start crying as soon as I touched my wrist joint? Mm-hmm. I touch it all the time. Put on a watch.
Right.
It's because the intention is different. And you're being guided to touch with a level of intention, attention, and interest and safety and connection that maybe you've never had before ever.
That's right.
Like by anybody.
Yeah.
Not even your mother.
Yeah. Yep.
That pierces through to a level of soul birthright memory that's so deep that you can't explain it. Just all you know is, wow, that really worked.
Yeah, this is how I've been wanting to be touched for my whole life.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
The one thing I want to go back to, just to give people some examples, like as I was coming out of this freeze, there were some interesting things that occurred because someone might be coming out of their freeze and they've, let's say, never had gut issues, because there was a point in time, I don't know when, it was years ago, where I had I was bloated.
That's right.
And I even had heartburn.
Yep.
I've never had that in my life. And it can be hard to not get worried. Mm-hmm. And I had to keep reminding myself, you kept reminding me, and eventually it passed. But what that was, again, for those who aren't as well versed in this, is that autonomic nervous system is no longer in lockdown.
Yeah.
It's not in freeze, and it's starting to feel more sympathetic energy, this fight flight. And so this gut that's been pretty calm and chill is like, what's going on? What's going on? We're gonna do weird things.
Yeah.
But it's not like that anymore. It only lasted for maybe a week or two.
Yeah. And there's been many things like that.
And then the other things would be, I'm even just thinking last August, there was a period of time where my wrists were so sore.
Yeah.
I couldn't even push myself up in bed.
Yep.
And I'm strong. Like but it's like, I hadn't done anything. It's not like I was doing nothing out of the ordinary. That is, like, to me, magically strange, because that is clearly my old wrist injuries and all the times I fell skating and all the times I fell skiing and all the poling and just this abuse of my body where I never knew to rest. Shortly after that, I had these weird calf pain. I don't know if you remember this. My calves were burning.
Right. Yep. That's right.
For no reason. They were like, I felt like if I were to put a pencil into them, they would explode.
Yeah, that's right. And you had memories. I remember you had memories of these crazy, like just so long ski touring, like days long. Yeah. Like just where you were just working your legs and just. Yeah.
The one was I was on the island of Crete.
Yeah, that's right. And you got dehydrated.
We had no water. We had these massive backpacks on our back, and we were walking up hills of sand. So is that? I don't know. Or is it just a culmination of all this use of the body that never let go? And then shortly after that, I had this intense pain in my sacrum and pelvis so bad that I couldn't bend over to brush my teeth.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the? And even though I know this, when it comes up, and this is for everyone here whom, don't know how to handle these things. Even I,
Mm-hmm.
whom teaches this stuff, still is amazed. And I get a little like scared, like, how long is this going to last?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And inevitably it always changes. It always
Oh yeah.
changes.
Oh yeah.
So, someone might be asking the question, well, Irene, well, will this ever end?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
And that's, yeah, we don't know for sure, but one thing that we do know is that the more we get worried about these things, the longer they stay.
Yes.
That worry is like a clamp that freezes it in
Yes.
place, and that's why we keep on reminding you, like, it's all right,
Yeah.
it'll pass. This is just that
Yeah.
thing coming through.
Yeah.
And it can be helpful, like, again, we've talked about relationships and
Mm.
people who are doing this work needing to have good relationships with people who understand, like, even if they're not doing the work, at least they
Yeah.
understand it
Yeah.
and like can relate to you about it and be
Yeah.
on the same page.
Yeah.
And also, understand that if you want to run to the doctor, like, is that something that you should never do, or like maybe you should, like, I mean,
Well,
right?
this is an interesting one because I have never, other than that time that my heart had that crazy blip, which was, I think, maybe when this freeze was really starting to come out.
Yeah.
And it was really what I would say my first ever panic attack, and it was intense.
Yeah.
And you made me go to the hospital, which
Yeah.
is unlike you.
Yeah.
And I did, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
So, like, okay.
Yeah.
But it was good validation at the
Exactly.
time.
Exactly.
But what I often see, and there's like this, I'm like doing this movement, it's like this back and forth because we're so ingrained with there's a symptom, there's a pain, I have to fix it, I have to see someone, I need to take a pill. And it takes a lot of trust to trust that this is an okay thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to be okay being really friggin' uncomfortable for a while.
Yep.
And this comes back to building foundation.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to resource yourself and connect to the ground and orient and follow your breath so it's not making it worse and worse and worse,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, you're going to probably have to go to the doctor because you're going to make it worse and worse and worse.
Yep.
And so I actually see still a lot of colleagues whom haven't taken this self-inquiry and this self-healing route to the point where they can really trust what's occurring and not meddle with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have an interesting story, right, with your gut.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually thinking about this the other night. Like you did go to the hospital with, I can't even remember what
That's
it was
right.
anymore.
Yeah. Diverticulitis. Yeah.
Right.
Because and this is the tricky thing with this work, because 99% of the time, I would say, it's your body doing what it needs to do.
Yeah.
No matter how weird, strange, painful, uncomfortable, odd, random it is.
Yeah.
That's been my experience, and the experience I generally see. About 99% of the time, it's just your body doing what it needs to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's actually a problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, I've been doing tons of inner work of all kinds for, decades and decades, and learned to tolerate incredibly intense sensations, without fear. But I had this one day in my gut, and it was like, it's kept on happening, and it felt really intense, and like, and I tried to just sort of be with it, and I was like, and I hate hospitals, like I avoid doctors like the plague, and you actually said, no, I think you probably should, and I agreed. I was like, yeah, this is unusual. And yeah, I had actually had an infection, a pretty serious gut infection. So,
Didn't he say that if you had left it, you would have like lost all your colon?
Yeah. Which, I mean, who's to say? Maybe I would have, it would have, because the stuff can heal naturally too. But the antibiotics were certainly very helpful and important at that stage. So, if you are really worried, go get it checked out. Because if nothing else, like with you, it rules stuff out, and that increases your sense of like, okay, no, this is just my body doing what it needs to do. And and hopefully this information today, understanding about how rashes and pains and aches and twists and turns and vectors in the body can come out will be helpful for a lot of people. And like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe, because this stuff can pop up out of nowhere,
Yeah.
right? Especially if we're actively doing this work.
And that's an important piece because let's just say you're doing this work either with an SE provider or its equivalent, or you're in my courses. And then you have, a thing come up like a pain, like a physical pain, but you're working on a lesson that has to do with breath. I don't know.
Yeah.
One of my, or something that has nothing to do with moving the body physically.
Yeah.
It's almost like you got to understand how everything can be connected, because you might brush off this tension in your, like I had these tensions in my wrists as, oh my God, do I have rheumatoid arthritis?
Right.
If I think about the symptoms that I've had in the
Yeah.
last, I would be to every single specialist that exists.
That's right.
Not every single specialist, but
Yeah.
Point
Yeah,
of
there's
exaggeration.
all sorts of diagnoses you could have self-applied or had applied to you.
Exactly.
That's the other thing, is sometimes you go in with these symptoms and they'll say, oh, you have this, and then you accept that label, and now you have a condition, and then actually that's not at all what's happening. Right?
Yeah, and you can keep that in your mind, and you can actually create
That's right.
that disease because you've been given it's like you've been given the first piece, and then the dominoes just fall.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
And
you start
so
stressing and worrying.
Yeah, it's a very intricate dance with these things, because again, to remind everybody, like the work that we're doing at this level isn't really documented.
Yeah.
This was never taught to us in the SE training.
Mm-hmm.
Ever.
Yeah.
We got into force vectors with Kathy on a specialty workshop, that was completely separate.
Yep.
So we're sort of charting new ground, new territory. And so we get the questions like, well, what about this pain? Or what about Raynaud's? Or what about IBS? Or what about this autoimmune condition? What do you think about lupus? What do you think about? And it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of it. Yep. It's all this stuff.
What about Alzheimer's? What about Parkinson's? We get that a lot.
Yeah.
And when you look at these things, inevitably they come down to stored survival stress and dysregulation.
Yep.
Even the psychiatric illnesses people have been saying, our mentors, these are all rooted in early developmental pre-verbal trauma, most of them.
Yeah.
That are then exacerbated because there's never any healing at that nervous system level. So
yeah. And also no education, right? Like, that's why the education is so important, just like people watching this video or your other videos, just so they can know, like, oh, I can have a really painful sensation. It doesn't necessarily mean something bad is happening.
Yeah.
Like, who gets taught that, right? It's so important to get the education.
Today, I was down at the beach, and there's always these little toddlers there. It's like, I think, a daycare.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that? They're always under the tree.
Yes, yeah.
And I want to just go and rip off those children's boots and coats because it's summer and they're dressed as if they're about to go fly fishing.
Yeah.
Like they've got their raincoat. It's not raining.
Yeah.
They've got their waterproof pants and their boots.
Because it's a little cloudy out.
I'm like there in shorts and a tank top. Yeah. And this one girl was wanting to get, she was super cute, water from the ocean. And then another kid ran up. And then, of course, the big person ran up. Be careful, be careful. But then the teacher or the caregiver had her shoes off. She was barefoot and in shorts.
Huh.
And then the little boy wanted to go in the water to get the water. And he got like, no. Don't get your shoes wet. That will make you uncomfortable. So it's these
all
subtle
this programming just going in.
It's so subtle, and someone might be saying, "Oh, come on, Irene, don't be so dramatic. That isn't a bad thing." It's like you're right. She didn't smack him.
Yeah.
It wasn't toxic shame. But why is he's just let him go in the water.
Yeah.
It's not
All the
like he's
ways and
walking into toxic waste,
that's right.
and
Well,
yeah,
it's just
maybe his shoes will get wet.
yeah. Yeah.
He might not even notice it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now, oh yeah, going into the water with my shoes, I'm going to get uncomfortable.
Yeah. Better avoid that. And just that whole mindset in general that leads them to be all overdressed, even just because it's a little cloudy out. It's like it's this general vibe of danger.
Yeah.
Just this sort of overarching, which we see all over the place, right? It's so hard for young people to develop a curious relationship with their body, with that, like, and you just get so primed to think that anything uncomfortable must be a problem.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything uncomfortable, anything natural, anything of the earth, don't touch that. It's dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Cover up. It's the sun. It's dangerous. It's raining. You better put a coat on.
Yeah.
I mean, within reason, sure,
Yeah.
but there's a reason why kids just want to be like without their coats.
Yeah.
Like they want to feel the cool breeze.
Yeah.
And then sooner or later, it's like, oh, I'm going outside. I put a coat on. That's what you do.
Yeah.
So as minimal as this example is with the kids, this is why in, again, our work, one of the primary things is to teach people to follow their impulses.
Yeah.
And try to decondition themselves from the conditioning.
Yeah.
And it can be damn hard when you've been doing that since before you remember.
That's right.
That little boy isn't going to remember this incident.
Yeah. But the little piece of information in there that says,
Slice.
yeah, this is dangerous or this will be uncomfortable. You have to avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything
Well,
else you want to talk about?
that was a lot.
Yes,
You could
it
probably leave it for there. I guess people know already where to find you if they're watching this.
Of course.
Maybe just considering checking out the online curriculum that you've created, which is, that is an important point you said about so much of what you teach and what we know didn't come from the SE training.
No.
Like both of us have become somatic experiencing practitioners. And there's many, many practitioners out there that's all they do, is that basic somatic experiencing training. And you really don't get much, really. We've been to 6-7 master classes with Peter, Kathy and Steve's training, your Feldenkrais training. So, that's just an important thing to note, that your curriculum, it brings all of this stuff into
Together.
one place that you're not going to get anywhere else.
And to be fair, those trainings taught me really well.
Yeah.
And you really well. And again, nothing is perfect and nothing is ever complete.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that I had the fortune, the time, the resource, the youth to devote pretty much from 1997 to now, or to say 2014, because I really haven't been in trainings very much, to just learn and bring this stuff in and then synthesize it so that it could be given to someone so they don't have to spend 17 years. Mm-hmm. Because up until now, you had to go to a professional training to get this information.
That's right.
You can't learn Feldenkrais really well in the public. You have to go to a training, and then there's a problem there, because then the trainings get diluted with just people who want it for a hobby, and it's not a real professional teacher training, and that's another story there.
Yeah, that's a whole other ball wax.
But yeah, I would say that again, those trainings that you just mentioned are good, and they're not everything, and they don't bring them together. Never once in these trainings were we guided through some kind of movement lesson to pay attention to our sensory motor aspects.
Right.
But in my Feldenkrais training, which taught that, never were we guided to consider fight, flight, freeze.
That's right.
So it's just a matter of we're in this progressive situation where these really great methodologies are starting to combine. Of course, I've had a big part in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think some of the stories on our sites seem too good to be true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can this one thing create so many different changes
Around
and
so
that
many
get
different issues.
exactly.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't, to say we're the only ones or I'm the only one, but we got some pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
And it does, you
Well,
know,
you are the only one who's combined these particular things all together in a
yeah,
cohesive way that's available to the public.
where someone could do it on their own.
That's right. That's right.
Because it is impossible to do this with a practitioner one-on-one. Even if you came and lived with me for 3 years, we couldn't get through all this stuff,
Yeah.
right? Because that's not possible.
Yeah.
And you couldn't stay with me for that long. So to do like 1 hour here, 1 hour there, it just takes too long. But the thing that maybe we'll end with is each person's system is different. And my story is unique in that I had none of the toxic shame, as you said at the beginning,
Yep.
really good humans for
Yep.
parents.
Yep.
But then I was thrown into this kind of interesting upbringing that taught me a lot. And I got spat out the other side with what would have been, I think, autoimmune. I would have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis, without a doubt,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
if I hadn't have
And psoriasis or
all of
right.
it.
All of it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be a mess.
Yeah. Yep.
And I say that because there are people who are a mess and they might be going, is there any hope? And I say, yes, there is. And you got to start slow, but you have to be consistent. And we can't say exactly how long it will take.
Right.
But the system doesn't want to hold on to these things. It doesn't want to hold on to the force vectors. It doesn't want to hold on to the chemicals. But it means we have to do some serious work to not put more forces and more chemicals into our body.
Yes.
So it also means having an interest in being very clean in your living so that you're not putting more crap into your system. And
Yep.
that is hard in our current society.
For sure.
We have you have to work. It takes work to be healthy in our current paradigm.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if
And
it
that's why
feels like there's a lot, it is.
it is. It's a lot. Well,
It's
and
a
that's why
lot.
you've been doing more videos with other people in different fields, like the circadian rhythm stuff and
Yeah.
nutrition, detox protocols.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you've realized over the years, it's not just the nervous system work. That's the foundation. Like, you need the nervous system work and education. Without that, nothing else sticks. But it's not enough on its own.
No.
And so, yeah, it is a lot. It takes work not to be poisoned, like you say, in this world. And it takes consistent work in order to heal and unravel this stuff. But it absolutely can be done.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other reason why it's important to do the nervous system work, when you really get into it and you really get into the body and you really get into the environment and into your sensations and your connection with nature, I mean, the simplest way to say is you become more sovereign in your system, and then it's easier to not get sucked in to the narratives of what you should be doing when you have this or what you should be doing when you have that.
Yeah.
There's so much programming around, oh, you have this, well, you must do this.
Right.
And so if you don't know how to pause and come back to self and back up into the natural world, you will probably go down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And so by learning how to really listen and really listen to the environment and orient to it, and it turns something on that will keep us a little more safe, I think, in this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you
current
learn to
crazy
discern.
world.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's so much
Yeah.
for, listening to your own impulses listening to the natural world, connecting there. Yeah, you learn to like sort of wait a second, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe I don't need to get pulled into that, right?
And it's important to listen to that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us will have these voices that come up that seem a little like, oh, what's that? It's like, if it's talking to you, there's probably a reason it's talking to you.
Yeah, the number of moms I hear who say like, I wish I hadn't listened to my doctor when he said to let him
Yes.
cry it out. Right? I had an instinct that said that was wrong, but he's the
Yes.
doctor. I know.
Yes.
So hear that over and over and over and over again.
Crying it out, tummy time, and the other
Yeah.
thing that we probably aren't supposed to talk about, where they just felt it was wrong and they went ahead and did it anyway, and
Yeah.
they now understand the consequences, or they now suffer consequences from that thing.
That's right.
But it's like the mama bear knows.
That's right.
But again, if that mom or that caregiver hasn't done their own work, they don't know how to stay strong in their conviction and say, nope, I'm taking my baby. We're not staying here.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's a great example, because you're
Absolutely.
right. We hear it all the time.
All the time.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Thanks for the talk.
Yeah. I'll see you upstairs.
Yeah. And then just to close this, so I don't have to do an additional ending. As Seth said, there's so much information on the site, on my site, courses, resources, classes, audio samplers. There's something there for everyone, from free to low fee to obviously our full 12-week curriculum, SmartBody, SmartMind. This video will probably go out early summer-ish. And we're going to run another round of SmartBody, SmartMind, the 12-week curriculum, which is what I had, which is what I wish I had back in the day. So
Yeah.
if you're brand new here, the one thing I will say, all our students say, I wish I had done this sooner. I wish I had known about this in my 20s, 30s, 50s. I wish I had known this when I was a teenager. Why don't you know?
Why doesn't anybody teach this stuff?
So that's going to run again in September 2023. Get on the wait list, learn about it, and just learn how to be in your body in a way that is more holistic so you can heal.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.